Well, thank you, everyone, for tuning into our program today. You may know that Family Talk is a listener-supported program, and we remain on the air by your generosity, literally. If you can help us financially, we would certainly appreciate it. God's blessings to you all.
That's right, Dr. Dobson. And friend, thanks to generous listeners like you, Family Talk can reach more and more listeners with practical help and encouragement. To support Family Talk with your best gift, go online to drjamesdobson.org or call 877-732-6825.
Today on Family Talk.
Whether intentionally or not, every mom wants to earn that title of being the perfect parent. These ultimate moms and dads always have a clean home, they're never late to events, and they have the best behaved kids. Now that's obviously a completely unattainable goal. And today's guest explains why that is a dangerous philosophy as well.
We define ourselves by the kind of car that we drive or we don't drive, by whether our children are behaving, whether our children look good or don't look good. If we aren't careful, we will get caught up in that. And when I realized I was doing that as a mom, here's what I realized. I was becoming a controlling mom because I wanted to control my children's behavior so they would look good and behave good so I would look good. That is not the most effective parenting method. My value and self-worth needs to be based upon who I am in God's eyes. And that's never going to change. And I think that is so important for us as moms to understand.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dr. James Dobson's Family Talk. I'm Roger Marsh, and on today's program, you're going to hear the remainder of a fascinating conversation Dr. Dobson had with author and speaker Jill Savage, who you heard just a moment ago. On yesterday's broadcast, we heard Jill walk us through some of a mom's major frustrations, such as having so much demanded of her or feeling as if she can never be alone in her own home. She also revealed that Jesus experienced similar feelings and shared about how he dealt with them during his ministry also. Now today, Dr. Dobson will continue to talk with Jill Savage about the obstacles that are facing the 21st century mother and highlight the importance of a supportive and helpful spouse to accomplish those goals. Now before we get to today's broadcast, let me remind you again about our guest today. Jill Savage is an accomplished author and an energetic speaker. In 1994, she founded Hearts at Home Ministries. She left that ministry last year and is currently the head of Jam Savage Ministries, which echoes the same vision of Hearts at Home by caring for and ministering to mothers. Jill Savage is the author of 12 books, including Better Together, the No More Perfect series, and the topic of these two broadcasts, Real Moms, Real Jesus. Jill is a highly sought-after speaker all over the country because of her knowledge and experience with parenting 5 kids of her own, along with her husband, Mark. Okay, with all that said, let's listen now to the remainder of Dr. Dobson's discussion with Jill Savage right here on Family Talk.
Well, Jill, let's pick up where we left off last time because we were moving rather systematically through your book. And we talked about some of the major frustrations that mothers of young children feel, and I think the older ones do too, in trying to keep up with everything. And the first issue that we discussed was the feeling of never being alone. You know, I can never have any time to myself. And the second one had to do with the high demands that are made on mothers. And everyone knows that that can create its own emotional stresses. Now, let's move on to another frustration that I know affects every mother, especially those that have preschool children, having to do with the lack of sleep. You can never get enough rest. And I think that's a link to everything else because you don't cope very well when you're exhausted, when you're tired.
You don't. And again, this was one of those places as I was reading through the biographies of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that I ran across the story of where Jesus was in a boat with his disciples, and it says he was so tired that he fell fast asleep. I mean, it was, one of those where, I just pictured by the way it read in the Bible that his head hit the pillow and he was out, And I thought, oh my gosh, I never thought about that Jesus would understand what that exhaustion feels like. Again, I just had never thought about his human experience. But then it says that in the middle of the night, so he's in this boat with the disciples, and in the middle of the night, a storm blows in. And you know what the disciples do? They get scared and wake him up.
That's right.
And I thought, hello, that is my life as a mother. My children wake up when they were little. They would wake up needing to be fed. They wake up in the middle of the night cold. They have a bad dream. A storm does come in and it scares them. And I had never, ever thought about the fact that Jesus would understand what interrupted sleep feels like. But in that particular story in the Bible, that's exactly what happened. And I thought of all those times that I sat up at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., rocking a baby or nurturing a toddler that had had a bad dream. And it had never crossed my mind to talk to Jesus about my frustration of being awakened or about just the reality of how exhausted I was, and to recognize that he would understand that. I mean, that's why the subtitle of the book, Real Moms, Real Jesus, is Meet the Friend Who Understands. He lived a human experience, and he knows what that feels like.
Jill, it is really surprising how many of the experiences of Jesus in that one gospel of Matthew relate to this topic. I hadn't really connected them to this point, but you really have come up with something here that is unique.
It really transformed my thinking. And the more that I read the stories of Jesus's life and his experience and recognized that they were similar to my life and my experience, what happened is he didn't feel so far away anymore. Suddenly, that distance that I had been feeling before I took this little journey through the biographies of Jesus, suddenly that distance was closing, and I didn't have a God who was distant and disconnected from me, but I truly have a friend who understands. And, the Bible talks about the Holy Spirit as being our friend, and that's what Jesus is he understands us. And when he faced those challenges, then the other thing that we can do is look at how did he handle that? And he handled that with grace, and he handled it with love. Sometimes he handled it with anger. I mean, he did draw some boundary lines too. We certainly see, righteous anger and understanding all of that. So I think both as we look at his experiences that we understand, but then also how he lived his life, that we have so much that we can learn from that friend who understands.
Ryan didn't sleep through the night for 4 months, and I know a lot of parents who have kids who don't sleep through the night for a year or two. But for Ryan, it was 4 months, and we were exhausted because we lived a very, very busy life in addition to being parents. And one night we had just come to the end of our rope, and Ryan was asleep. And we got down by our bed, and we just said, Lord, would you let him sleep through the night tonight? I mean, just this one time, if we could get a complete night of sleep. And it was a Friday night, so we could sleep in on Saturday. And we just almost begged the Lord for a favor here. And the next morning, the sun was up, and we suddenly opened our eyes. And we got up on our elbows and looked at each other and said, he did it.
I know you
what
are.
What has gone wrong? Where is
You're
he?
rushing in there to make sure they're okay.
Jill, you talk about being worried at night until the kids got in. And I was the worrier. Shirley figured that out early on.
So she just let you handle that,
She just let me handle it. She would go to sleep, and I would pace the floor waiting for the kids to get in. I lost a lot of sleep that way, I'll tell you. Jill, the next item that you wrote about in this book, Real Moms, Real Jesus, was betrayal. Why would a mom feel betrayed? What are the circumstances that are so common?
Well, I don't think that there's a human that hasn't experienced feeling betrayed at some point in time, where somebody has broke a confidence, has in some way let them down. And, it wasn't until I was reading through the biographies of Jesus, and I certainly came to the story of where Judas betrayed Jesus, and which ultimately took him to the cross. And I'll add in, disappointment is another part of that. Again, as I was reading through, I ran across where Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane. And he said to his disciples, he knew what he was facing. He said, will you pray with me? And they, in essence, said, absolutely, we got you covered, And so Jesus said, I'm going to pray over here. You stay here and pray. And they said, okay. And Jesus went away and he prayed and poured his heart out to God. And then he came back and he found his disciples asleep. Can you imagine the disappointment he must have experienced? And again, I had never thought about the fact that Jesus would understand disappointment and betrayal. And we deal with that every day. Moms deal with disappointment. I remember one time my husband called me as he was getting ready to come home from work. And he said, do you need anything? I'm getting ready to leave the office. And I said, yes. I'd had a heck of a day, and I'd been trying to figure out what I was going to have for dinner. And so I said, I figured it out, but I need more milk. He said, okay, I'll stop and pick up milk. Well, 30 minutes later, the man walks through the door empty-handed. Now, he drove by 3 grocery stores on the way home, but he had no milk. Now, at that moment, Mark, where's the milk? Oh my gosh, I got a phone call before I left and I got distracted and I forgot it. And I quickly said, you have screwed up my plan for cereal for dinner. But the reality is there are moments like that we experience disappointment. Somebody lets us down. They promise they'll do something. Our child doesn't behave right in public. Our husband forgets to pick up the milk or the dry cleaning or something he said he would do. And quite frankly, my actions disappoint him as well. And never had I considered that Jesus would understand what that disappointment feels like, and that I could, A, talk to him about it, and B, learn from how he handled those things. Jesus handled disappointment and betrayal with forgiveness. And, one of the things I've really come to understand, and especially in my journey to understand Jesus' experience on this earth, my relationship with him, is I honestly had to face something several years ago I didn't even realize I was doing. You see, I was putting my value and my self-worth in my children's behavior. And that's a really dangerous thing to do because what happens is when we put our value and our self-worth in our children's behavior, we're yanked around all over the place because their behavior's good and then it's not so good. And then they, throw a temper tantrum in the middle of Walmart, or your teenager makes a poor choice. And if all of that defines you, then that's what I believe the Bible talks about, building our life on sinking sand. And we need to be defined by Jesus Christ because he's the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. He never changes. And that is building our life on a solid rock.
I've written about that at some length because I see it as a major problem with parenting, and it's in some cases inevitable, and it can be exacerbated by the scripture that says, and it's in Proverbs, train up a child in the way he shall go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. Mm-hmm. That sets you up, if you accept that as an inevitability, that sets you up for taking the blame for everything your son or daughter does. Because if I had trained them up properly, this wouldn't be happening. And somehow their sin and their failure to carry the responsibility that they ought to, the wrong things they do, are an outgrowth of the fact that I have failed as a parent. Now, the Scripture does not mean that. I am absolutely convinced of that. I agree. Because that Scripture is a proverb, and the Proverbs are not promises. You just read the Proverbs and see if you can make them into promises. Those who are lazy don't eat. Well, sometimes lazy people do quite well economically, So they're not promises, they're probabilities. This is the way it usually works. It usually works that if you raise your children properly, they're going to turn out right. But it's not inevitable. And it's wrong for a parent to take that blame on themselves for everything bad that happens. I want to tell you something else. It's just about as foolish to take all the credit for when they do things right.
Well, yes.
Because that may not have been your idea, too. Really, the best explanation for that is Adam and Eve in the garden. They had a perfect environment. They had a God who was infinite, and He was essentially the Father to them, and they still did wrong. They did not remain faithful to what God had told them to do. And so there you have an example of the father figure, the Creator, being disappointed in His first two creations. And it wasn't His fault. I don't know if I can make that understood, but that's a very important point.
But we do tend, I think as a society, we define ourselves by the kind of car that we drive or we don't drive, by the neighborhood we live in or we don't live in, by the number on the scale, by whether our children are behaving, whether our children look good or don't look good. I mean, we all naturally, I think the human experience, if we aren't careful, we will get caught up in that. And when I realized I was doing that as a mom, here's what I realized. I was becoming a controlling mom because I wanted to control my children's behavior so they would look good and behave good so I would look good. That is not the most effective parenting method. And it's not a godly way of doing things. We need to be separated from our child's behavior. And that's why I say my value and self-worth needs to be based upon who I am in God's eyes. And that's never going to change. And I think that is so important for us as moms to understand.
Have you thought about the fact that the better parent you are and the more invested in your children you are and the more you care about how they perform in school and do things, the more vulnerable you are to guilt. Guilt is greater for the good parent than the one who doesn't seem to care.
Boy, I
that
never
isn't
thought
always
about
that way, but it can work that way. Well, I said at the end of the program last time that I'd like to have a few words with the men with regard to the role of the mom. And we began the program on a fast pace, and we haven't had a chance to even return to that. Dads are not irrelevant to all this. We're talking about moms and the frustrations they feel and overwhelming responsibilities that come their way. But dads need to understand that. They need to read this book. I hope some of them are listening today. And one of the experiences that Shirley and I had goes back to your feeling, Jill, that there was just too much to be done and you were very compulsive about it and that you couldn't go to bed until all the, all the toys were put up and all those things. We talked about it last time. Shirley was like that. Shirley wanted to be the world's best mother. And frankly, I think she came close to it. But she would be sitting on the floor folding clothes after they had been washed, at midnight. And she needed her rest too. And we were both running like crazy. I was working on my PhD, and I'd help when I could, but she was taking on much of this responsibility herself. And frankly, it was killing her. So I managed to scrape together a little bit of money and arranged to have her get some help once in a while, maybe once a week, and to take some of that pressure off of her. But my point is that I had to be sensitive to that. I had to understand what she was experiencing in order to take our family in that direction. And I hope some other men who are listening does. Not everybody can afford that. I understand it.
And I was just thinking, I'll speak to the part, we've never been able to afford that. But I will say, my husband, I will sing his praises because when I am with, piles of laundry and folding them, he steps right in there and folds right along with me. And I think that's another way that husbands can step in and help and help carry some of that load of filling the dishwasher, emptying the dishwasher, changing diapers. My husband and I talk a lot on marriage. We do marriage retreats together at churches and stuff. And one of the things that we will talk about is, honestly, the man that could do no wrong before we had children could do no right after we had children. Because my perfectionistic tendencies, everything that he did, I either redid or I complained about or criticized. And I really had to come to grips where my critical spirit was actually keeping him from being able to be that partner.
Mm-hmm. Well, our time is gone. The title of the book is Real Moms, Real Jesus. Meet the friend who understands. I know he does, Jill. He does understand. But put it into words in closing here for the woman who's out there. Does Jesus really understand when you're exhausted and when you've tried so hard and things still don't go quite right? What did you experience in your quiet times, if you had them, by interacting with Jesus?
Well, you know what? As I really began to look at those human experiences, the years that he lived on this earth, the people issues that he had to deal with, the physical issues that he had to deal with, pain, weariness, needing to rest, needing to set boundaries, I really have come to understand how much he understands us and how much of a disservice I was doing really in my relationship with him, not understanding that. And the more I've understood that, the closer I've gotten to him. And I've realized that, you know what? You can't be a perfect parent, but you can partner with a perfect God. And I think that is the essence of what I hope moms begin to understand with Real Moms, Real Jesus.
Thank you for being our guest on these 2 days. It's a pleasure talking to you. You have a very unique book. I don't think anybody's written on this subject in just the same way. And you have another book that I had hoped to get to, and I'd like to invite you back to talk about it, called Living with Less So Your Family Has More. And this has to do with a decision that you and your husband made in your family to give priority to the kids instead of, trying to earn more so you could buy more. Mm-hmm. And it was not an easy thing for you to do, but you describe it in this book, and we'll talk about it the next time you're here.
I'd love it.
What an amazing, godly woman who has devoted her life to inspiring and strengthening other moms. If you missed the first part of Dr. James Dobson's conversation with Jill Savage here on Family Talk, go to the broadcast page at drjamesdobson.org. Once you're there, you will also find information on Jill's speaking engagements, her ministry, and how you can order any of her insightful books. Again, go to drjamesdobson.org and then click onto today's broadcast tab. As a reminder, Family Talk is very active on social media, and we would love for you to get plugged in with us there. Our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages are full of Christ-centered content that you will want to pass along to your family and friends. Now, you can listen to past broadcasts, read our latest blogs, or Dr. Dobson's newsletters. You'll also be encouraged by various scripture verses and quotes that we've posted there as well. So the next time you're on your Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, be sure to like our page when you search for Dr. James Dobson's Family Talk. Finally, if you enjoyed today's program and you'd like to receive a copy of it, be sure to contact our offices here in Colorado Springs at 877-732-6825. When you call, one of our representatives will be happy to send you this broadcast on CD or to help you find any of our other popular broadcaster resources as well. You can also leave a comment or make a broadcast suggestion on our listener feedback line as well. So call 877-732-6825. That's a toll-free number, 877-732-6825. And please know how much we appreciate your comments and also your support of this ministry. Be sure to join us again tomorrow for the first installment of a two-part conversation Dr. Dobson had with Morton Blackwell, founder of the Leadership Institute, and learn how they are fighting for conservative values on college campuses. That's coming up next time right here on Dr. James Dobson's Family Talk. I'm Roger Marsh. Thanks for listening.
Family Talk is not associated with Focus on the Family.
Roger Marsh here for Dr. James Dobson's Family Talk. Are you listening on the go? Well, download the free smartphone mobile app for Dr. James Dobson's Family Talk today. It works with iPhones, it works with iPads, it works with Android devices, and best of all, you can get this program delivered to you every day. Now, this is a great way to stay connected to Family Talk. And not just the Family Talk broadcast, you can also join the conversation at our Family Talk Facebook page. You can also read blogs if you want. You can watch videos on topics like faith or family or the culture. You can even search for books and digital media in our resource center and much, much more. To get the mobile app for Dr. James Dobson's Family Talk, go to drjamesdobson.org and download it today. That's drjamesdobson.org.